talk about the 6 steps in processing grief. We have shock, trauma, acceptance, introspection, reinvestment, and serenity, I call them. We're used to the DABDA with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. God bless her soul, and they were for the dying and had been applied to the grieving, and is still applied in many cases today in institutions and in learning about they are actual feelings and emotions that Kubler-Ross is talking about, but mostly for the dying, not for the grief-stricken. Because they're not in order, you know, and some people don't have anger, and some people, and denial is truly just delayment, it's just postponement. So I think this is a little easier to understand. So for shock, we all go into shock. Unilaterally, we go into shock when we have a loss. Hormonally, we go into shock. I mean, our body goes into shock. How else will we be able to pick out the casket and the flowers and go to a funeral and comforting people at our loved ones' loss, and we're comforting them? Oh, I'll be fine. And we're doing all this gregarious activity and hugging people and being good. And people are going, wow, you know, and how do we get through that? Because we're drugged, you know, hormoned out. We can get us through this. But then when that hormones wear off, the shock wears off, and reality starts to creep in, we go into trauma. And we realize we are in full-blown trauma. We've had a horrible experience in our life, and now we have to deal with it. Sans the hormones. So that, and when we're in that, now people have a choice now. What do I do? Do I stay? How do I go on antidepressants? Do I go to grief groups? What do I do? All the above. But it's accepting it is the most critical part, that it has happened. Not accepting how it happened or why it happened or who was responsible for it, but accepting the challenge to survive. The challenge to create a legacy, just a challenge to get through this. And that is a life challenge, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel. You just can't see it early on. And that through that acceptance, we open up, we look in ourselves and say, okay, what do I have? What don't I have? What skills do I have? What gifts do I have? We go on and on and on. And we find out, wow, I never knew I like to write, but I know I could be a writer, a fairly okay writer. And I was never going to be a speaker. I was never a Toastmaster. I was in 9th grade play once, but otherwise I was never up at the podium. But I found out that this works for me. And I was an artist. My parents were both grandparents were artists. So I reinvested into things that I could that would help other people. And helping other people was the thing that really brought me back. The more I did something for other people, the more I did. When I came back one day, my wife came in the house whistling and smiling. And she goes, "Are you drunk?" I thought, "No, why?" She goes, "Oh, you look so happy." I said, "I just gave blood today at the Red Cross, and my blood went to a little boy that had cancer." I said, "How wonderful is that? That I can help save this little boy." And so I said, "I want to do this. I got to do this more." So I called the Red Cross. "Can I come and get more blood?" And they said, "Well, you got to wait 6 weeks or whatever the period is for whole blood." And I said, "Oh, do I have to wait that long?" And they said, "Well, no, we have apheresis now." It was called phoresis back then. You can come in, we'll just draw the blood from each arm, spin it out, take what we need, and we'll put it back in again. And I said, "Okay, I'll do that." And I said, "You can do that every 2 weeks." "Oh, sign me up." So I did. And I said, it became a part of my life. And every time I sat in that chair, I said, "This is for Kelly." And to see, and now to realize now I'm retired, and my goal was to do 50 gallons of blood. And because of health issues, I've stopped. But I stopped when I hit my 50-gallon mark, which has served over 2,000 people with blood products. And I said, wow, what a legacy for my son that was just flippant at the time. I did it personally because it made me feel good, but not realizing how much of value that is to the rest of the world. So it's what you do. And that's how I got to step 6 with serenity, finding peace by being active part of my journey, being the CEO of your grief. And doing it to what worked for you, not what worked for them. Or you can listen to other people, but you got to follow your own heart. And we're all different. Whether man or woman, we're different. We have different amounts of prolactin, different amounts of oxytocin, testosterone. You know, we're different, but yet we all have the same same hormones, but they react differently. So even men and women react differently. But as human beings, we can balance hope and despair. We find equilibrium. I talk about equilibrium the biggest thing in proactive grieving is finding equilibrium, body, mind, soul, and spirit. And that's how we can be the most resilient that we can be. It's called adaptability. Our body is adaptable. It's the id in Freud's terms. You know, it adapts. Homeostasis happens continually, our blood pressure, our temperature, without regard. We don't think about our body. It takes care of itself. But it is always telling us what we need. When women are pregnant and they need certain vitamins or certain minerals and they have cravings, because their body brain is saying, I need this stuff. We have just as many brain neurons in our gut as we do in our brain. And so we have this vagus nerve that goes back and forth, communicating all the time. It is telling us what we need. But we don't always listen to the body. We're locked up in our brain because we're smart enough, good enough, and we think we know what's going on. So we use our brain, and I don't listen to the body. And we need to. Then we have the mind, and that's where we vibrate most of the time is in our mind. Confidence, education, we educate ourselves, we have our confidence, and it's our superego, which overrides our ego, which is always telling us, even the ego wants to do something, the superego says, oh, I'm smarter, I'm educated, you really should do it this way. Instead of that gut feeling, which is our ego, saying, oh, God, I really, I'm not sure. So you have to try to balance out the input you get from the body, input you get from the mind, and input from spirit. And spirit is our purpose in life. We look for our spirit for guidance, our connection to a higher power, collective unconscious, or source that Freud called it. So we are the other part of the 4 pillars of equilibrium, as I call them, is soul. That is the decision maker. That's where ego resides, and our sociality with the friends we make at work and with friends, family. So it's akin to if you look at, to make it simple, it's like the 4 pillars of equilibrium are the body is a vehicle. It gets us from one place to the next. This is our body. It functions. The mind is the control system on the car, the computer system, the motor, the dashboard that operates the car. How do we animate the car? Gasoline. Spirit animates our body. That is our energy from the universe. It animates our body. And who's left? Soul in the driver's seat. So they are different components. You're in that driver's seat. You listen to what the dashboard is saying. You need sustenance. You need gas. You need that other part. You can live on three of those columns without the spirit, but you run out of gas, literally. You don't have the energy to go forward. So it's finding balance in all those areas.